and welcome to the Quincy Access Television Studios. I'm Mark Crosby. Welcome to A Conversation with Councilors at Large. Thank you once again for joining me, and I'm going to thank my guest, who is a Councilor at Large here in the city of Quincy, Nina Liang, for joining me today, and I suppose joining you as well. So Nina, welcome back.
Good to be here.
It's been a little while since we've kind of had this chat, so I always say that it's been too long, but I'm glad we certainly, our schedules accommodated to have this program here today.
No, I'm glad that you guys do this. I think, honestly, it's a really good opportunity for all of us to connect with residents who maybe don't tune into some of the other channels that we have to communicate with them, so I appreciate it.
And I'm always out and about. There's no Nielsen rating system for public access, as you're probably aware, but the best feedback we get is when I'm out in the community and people say, I saw this program, I watched this, this was very informative, and I get a lot of that. So certainly, if it was just me on camera, I'm sure we wouldn't get as many comments or as many good comments, but it certainly is the power of the guests that come in that make that possible. So thank you.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Let's talk about some recent council news. I guess the biggest one of the biggest things is the review of existing zoning codes. Well overdue.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this. Super excited for this initiative. It's going to be, I think, a huge effort that's going to require, support and help from everyone, all of my colleagues, particularly the ward councilors, as they know their wards best, the administration, and of course residents and community organizations. So when I first started thinking about this and working with Jen Manning, the clerk of committees in the city council office, on the sort of history of zoning in our city, it really came from a place where, over the years in doing this work, right, it's been consistently, I think, overall the same issues over and over again. The stories might be different, right, and each person bringing us the issues, maybe their experience is different, but it really stems from, I think, the traffic in the city, right, the development that's going on, more people are moving to this city, right, and these are all great things, right, because Quincy's great and everyone's getting on board with that, so they're all coming here, but ultimately, all these sort of day-to-day issues that people are facing come from that development, right, and so, I think I wanted to approach it by doing a residential tax exemption, right, to address the affordability part. And we worked for years to try to make that happen. And I'm not saying that that's impossible, but it seems to be, something that's going to take a lot more time to be effective than I wanted it to. We just simply don't have the commercial base, right, to offset essentially what we'd be losing in dollars from a residential tax exemption. So until we really build enough commercial to do that, we can't implement it. How long will that take? I don't know. It might take years, and we don't have years, right? So, okay, that's not a solution I can do right now.
And the current building has been leaning more toward residential.
It has, you're right. So it's slow
And not
growing.
only this community, by the way.
Oh no, in every community. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you have to build what the market is looking for, right? I mean, if you're talking, how do you finance, if you and I want to go and build something and we say, all right, let's build, 100,000 square feet of commercial space, we need to get lending for it. And if banks are looking and saying, it's just not feasible. You can build this building, but we're not going to lend you the money because we're not taking that risk with you. It's not there right now. So people are looking at building more residential where people are actually going in and renting and or buying, right? And so, again, that being said, that wasn't a solution, right? And then you take a look at the issues we have with congestion and looking at alternative means of transportation. And so you're thinking about planning for, a good mobility plan. We talked before about a mobility plan that I wanted to implement, and thinking about how do we change the way that people can commute in this city? How do we change that infrastructure, right? And when we started exploring that, it was right at the beginning of 2020 when everything went kaput, right? And so now here we are, again, just thinking about those two aspects, the development in the city, where growth is physically happening, restructuring our infrastructure and thinking about actual travel on our roads. It comes down to rezoning. For me, that's what I think is the key here. If you're talking about rezoning an entire city, you're talking about reestablishing what and where you build, and then that impacts as well, how many people you're putting on the roads in a particular area, right? You're talking about improving and changing the infrastructure in areas where you're developing as well to accommodate that growth, right? So I just think that is the way to go. It's been 50 plus years since we did the last citywide rezoning. So it's due time, I think, even independent of the issues, I think it can solve.
Certainly, a lot happens in 25 years. A lot happens in 10 years, never mind 50 years. So absolutely. Getting back to the mobility plan, explain that a little more. What would that incorporate? Would that incorporate, or does that incorporate cyclists?
Oh yeah, all of it. So I looked at other cities and towns, not just in Massachusetts, but across the nation that had implemented mobility plans. And it's everything from ADA compliance on your sidewalks to making sure that they're also wide enough to accommodate, strollers, and making sure the curb cuts are done the right way, making sure there's pedestrian safety on crosswalks, right? Making sure that there's coordination with the lighting systems, making sure that, there's coordination with like on and off freeways. I mean, all of it. And of course, protected bicycle lanes for, again, alternative means of transportation.
And we should talk about, when you mentioned crosswalks, there have been these signals that have been placed throughout the city that has allowed pedestrians to cross safely.
Yeah, so there's one in particular right here in Quincy Center that you can see where it's the hard stop red light, right, that allows pedestrians to cross when they need to. And then it flips over to the flashing red lights. And I've gotten a lot of calls, actually very recently from my mom, about a week ago, who was like, that light can't be there. These folks barely have time to cross on the hard red, and then it starts flashing red and nobody knows what's going on. I'm like, Mom, we're not changing that though. I understand your frustration, but it's a change, I believe, because when you have the hard red for that long of a time, particularly in an area that's already so congested, right? If folks aren't crossing and cars aren't moving, everything's at a standstill at that point, right? When it flips over to the flashing red, you do still have to stop if there are pedestrians crossing, so it still protects them.
So you're talking Hancock Adams Common, that area there. But beyond that, there are these, I guess, yellow, I don't believe they're red, pedestrian lights. I know Ward 2 has a few. Your colleague, Anthony.
The flashing red light, the flashing yellow lights. Yes.
That are specifically located at crosswalks, not unlike the crosswalk we're talking about across from Hancock Adams Common, but at crosswalks on streets not as busy.
Yes, and thank goodness for those. I've driven through them, not just here in Quincy, obviously, but all over the place, and I think they're fantastic, right? They're very bright, very well noticed by folks, by drivers, and I feel like it's safer for pedestrians. They feel safer.
Well, especially at night or dusk, dawn.
100%. So I think they're very effective. I appreciate that, in talking to certain developers who maybe want to develop at a main intersection where right now there's a crosswalk with no flashing lights, that they're willing to incorporate that into some of the mitigation too.
Let's talk about, there's so much to talk about on this topic alone, but let's talk about the Ricciuti Drive intersection. There's an off-ramp there. The state is looking into it. This really came into play when Granite Links was looking at a 100-year lease that has since been withdrawn, but that intersection is a problem, correct?
Oh yes, 100%. Yes, I'm not a fan of driving through that intersection at all, right? And so I can't.
Neither am I.
Oh, it's awful. It's
and there's
awful.
No other way to get there.
Oh my gosh, you said it right. There's no other way to get up there, right? Or even to I go to the UPS store a lot over there. It's convenient, right? It's close by to where I live. But sitting at that intersection, trying to just Hail Mary through that intersection, right? Hoping that I'll be okay. It's really dangerous, and that's me in a big car that's protected by a car. Think about the pedestrians. Think about the bicyclists in that area. Think about those who are on motorcycles going through that area, right?
We were talking about that earlier,
absolutely.
Yeah,
it's exceptionally dangerous and has been for quite some time. So I'm glad they're taking a look at it to redo it.
Staying with zoning, I guess, again, I had mentioned there's so much to talk about, but marijuana dispensaries. And I believe your colleague, Councilor Andronico, was concerned that they might be concentrated in one ward in the city more than another.
Yeah, and I don't think he's incorrect with that, right? It was Councilor Andronico primarily who brought this initiative forward to review it and to look at rezoning it. And Councilor Devine as well, in advocating for Ward 4, noticed it in his ward just due to some of the folks coming up to planning and zoning who were proposing it in his ward, right? And so if you look at the city map and you look at the areas that are more heavily concentrated with residential areas and some that have a little bit more balance with commercial, Ward 2 and Ward 4 take more of that when it comes to commercial, right? And so the way we had zoned this originally, it was actually in front of my committee, an ordinance committee, when it was passed, not unanimous, but when it was passed to make legal in Quincy, we as a city council had to look at it and say, okay, the voters chose, it's legal, it's our job now to figure out about where to zone it. And we came in really conservative when the original zoning was proposed to us in that committee, and we looked at it. It was meant to be just in commercial heavy areas, and again, just by default, that ended up being Ward 2 and Ward 4. Over time, I think what we were going to consider is, do we need to revisit that and make changes based on what the impact looks like to our community, right? It's been quite a number of years now. We have a place open right now that does recreational, right? And so far, so good. And so I think this was the intent, certainly it was for me, to implement zoning, get some shops up and running, and then take a look at it and revisit it and rezone, right, to accommodate what the needs are in the community. And that's exactly what we're doing. So I'm glad they brought it to our attention now versus waiting to do it. They're very proactive, the both of them, in doing this. But I think it's the right call. I think it's the right thing to look and see.
And it certainly fits in with the rezoning of the city.
Yes, it does. And this is also why I'm really excited about the citywide rezoning, because we've done 200 plus small zoning changes like this over the years. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think they're done because they're needed over time. I also, though, do think it's time to look and say, okay, with those 200 plus edits we've made over the years, the last time we did this citywide was 50 plus years ago. This is a good time now to do, a one big sort of snapshot about, are we in the right place with our zoning, or should we change it? So definitely is the right thing to keep doing the immediate rezoning changes we need to get done. I also think we still need to do the citywide rezoning, though.
I think back, I suppose, years ago, and how the city's business districts were broken up. There was Quincy Center, there was Wollaston Center, North Quincy, and I suppose you can also consider Marina Bay now. Talk about those, I suppose, centers of business, and clearly there's continues to be movement in downtown Quincy with the new proposed, I believe, office space. Wollaston Center, we can talk about that as well. North Quincy, if anyone has been down in that area, especially by the high school, a lot of residential units have popped up there.
Yeah, a lot of changes. I love thinking about this, right? When you bring up that sort of the whole strip of Hancock Street and all those little districts, right? And how much has changed over the years. It's so near and dear to my heart. I grew up in North Quincy, right? And so to see the evolution of Billings Street and Hancock Street and the evolution of North Quincy, outside of the high school, that area. And then my family, their first restaurant was in Wollaston, right there across from where the Dunkin' Donuts is. And then, of course, we expanded the businesses in Quincy Center. And so just to understand and see, and having grown up, seeing the evolution of it, it's incredible. North Quincy now, even though you physically maybe haven't seen that many changes with commercial, the businesses that have been in that area have definitely changed over the years. And so you see more people looking to Quincy to say, that's where I want to start my business, right? That's where I want to build my business. And I've even talked to folks in Boston who say, I've got to bring somebody by and meet with you because they're looking at Quincy to, open up their first business. And, they think that that's actually a lot better to do it there than to even do it in Boston. So you see even business owners in Boston, not even residents, business owners looking to come to Quincy instead because they just see it as a better opportunity, right? And so it's really, really cool to see the evolution of it. But again, for me, it's how can we make sure it all fits together, right, for the future? We can't keep doing things piecemeal, and I feel like that's kind of what's happened with the growth. I'm for it. I think it's incredible. It's definitely moved our city forward. I'd like to see some cohesiveness with all of it, though.
Quincy Center T Station, there is some news on the horizon regarding rebuilding that station. Wollaston, the Wollaston T was rebuilt, but that area is continuing, like a lot of other areas in the city, to go through new development and new growth. And I guess that brings me to the spot that used to be the Wollaston Theater. Has there been any movement on that? Do you know?
Well, not that I know of for the specific location, but I know in that entire area, we are still moving forward with the Wollaston URDP, right? So not unlike Quincy Center, when we essentially took that whole district and said, we're going to revitalize this district, we're going to focus our energies on making sure that, developers and, retailers and folks are coming in to essentially revive this area, the same plan is going to happen for Wollaston. It's still very much in its infancy, right? There's a lot of steps we need to take as a city, working in conjunction with the state, and of course, planning department is doing phenomenal work in moving this forward. But all of these things need to happen before we can actually see any shovels in the ground, and so Wollaston will definitely get revitalized. We're going to see new buildings going up there as well. But again, it's about cohesiveness, right? It's going to stretch. Not just from the Hancock side of Wollaston, but also over to the Brook Street side, right, off of Newport. And so you're talking about a huge chunk of Wollaston that will look different in the years to come. And so we just want to make sure that residents and business owners that are currently there understand the process, understand what to expect, and can be a part of it, you know.
We'll talk about some state involvement on C Street, specifically Mass DOT. C Street, I believe it's the second phase of the revitalization of that corridor. And that kind of brings into play Mount Wollaston Cemetery, which is going through an upgrade, I suppose, and the public safety headquarters.
Yeah, so it's, you know, really exciting to see, again, that there are people invested in Quincy, right? To know that, you know, we've continued to implement a capital improvement plan to fix our infrastructure. Now the state is doing their part as well. So it's great, right, to know, again, that people are invested in our city on so many different levels. It's very much needed. I mean, if you drive that strip right now, first of all, the speeding there is atrocious, right? When you come down and start going down C Street into either Housneck or Germantown, the speeding is wild. I've had folks behind me, right, tail me and then honk their horns and do that, like where they swerve really quickly around you. And I'm like, I'm going 30. I'm already going over the speed limit at 30, right? So, but it happens all of the time. And so I think that this will be, for many reasons, but in particular, curbing the speeding, really important to get done. So I'm looking forward to it. And then, you know, making your way back down to Wollaston Cemetery and to the public safety headquarters. Again, I mean, the roads are going to look great, sidewalks are going to look great. Let's make sure that the city looks great as well. And I think that's what those two projects will do.
And in that same area, Father Bill's has just gone, I guess, emerged from a revitalization. Quite a unique establishment has been created there.
Yeah.
And again, I speak of this because it's in that area.
Yeah, I just want to say very clearly a heartfelt thank you to the team there. And frankly, to everyone who made that building possible. I mean, for years, again, growing up in the city and working in the city, back before the Hancock lot was redeveloped, I remember, I mean, the folks that need this service, you know, we would run into some of them, and I remember very, very clearly sitting on the bench outside one of the restaurants, right? And there was a gentleman there, and he said, you know, he wasn't hurting anybody. Nobody had any complaints. He was just sitting there, and I wanted to see, you know, did he need anything? And he was just saying, no, I'm just waiting to go over to Father Bill's, you know, and get a bed for the night. And I said, okay. And we got to talking, and, you know, he's a gentleman that just made some mistakes, unfortunately, right? Got caught with marijuana a couple of times back before it was legal, and you know, he knew he made the mistake, but unfortunately lost his job because of it, kept looking for more work. He was a nurse actually at the time too, so of course it's very difficult, right? And just slowly over time, when he wasn't able to find a job, lost his house, lost everything, you know. And that is just one story, right? Think about every other, you know, person, individual, child, family, whoever it is that needs this service. At the time, it was just a place to go to rest your head, you know. And for so long, everyone I spoke to in the community, there was not one person that was like, get them out. We don't want them here. It was always a conversation of, what can we do to better serve them? Because it has to be more than just a place to rest your head. It needs to be programming and services, and how do we connect them to things that actually can be resources? And that's what this new center is. And so I don't want to get emotional thinking about it, because it's incredible to know that we can do that for people, whether or not they live in the city, to know that we as a city can offer that. I mean, how amazing, like how much pride can you have knowing, see, now I'm getting emotional, that you live in a city in that, you know, is literally building things to give back and to help other people. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible to be a part of. And so,
and I think the stereotypical attitude with homeless folks is that they did it to themselves.
Yeah.
And clearly this story is an example of a person not doing that. So there are many stories like the one you just told.
Right. I mean, again, he made mistakes and he knew it. But if you fast forward, if he got caught with marijuana now when it's legal, completely different story, right, than when it had happened when it was illegal. I mean, so it's so many circumstances that come together that create this moment that just sets a person down a path that none of us want to
I think
be
what I'm
on,
going
you
to
know?
say, what I meant to say probably to make it clearer, is that these folks are bad folks, and that's not the case.
Right, exactly that, yeah. And so, but again, it's just incredible. I think it's amazing what they're doing over there, and a tremendous resource for the city.
And over there, it is no longer over there. Matter of fact, temporarily it has moved to, I believe, where Squantum Gardens used to be, and that's the animal shelter, but it's only temporarily there because it does have a new home on Quarry Street. Any update on that new home?
Gosh, can't happen soon enough, I guess, is the only
That's
update
what the
I have.
pets say.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, I've been up to the dog park a few times to walk the dog, and it's just, you know, I see the construction fencing up there, and so I know that there's work being done. I know that everyone is eager to get it done, right? We want to get these folks a new home. We want to get the volunteers a new home. It's a great location. There's just not enough time in the day, right? So I'm hoping it'll be done sooner rather than later. I know that in talking to Paul Hines from the Public Buildings Department, over the years, he's, you know, just as frustrated seems like a strong word, but every time I say to him, like, oh, hey, we're ready to get this opened up, what's going on? He's like, I know. But the thing is with Paul is that he wants things to be done perfectly, and he wants things to be done right. And so it's taking longer than I would like, but I know it's because, again, and this is just from talking to him about different projects over the years, he nitpicks about everything when it comes to public buildings getting redone or built for the first time in this city. So, you know, I know he's there with fine-tooth comb, making sure it gets done right, but yeah, hopefully soon we'll get it open.
Well, let's talk about something that has recently been completed, and there was a grand opening ceremony, I believe, this past Sunday, and that's the Dr. Richard DeCristofaro Learning Center.
Yeah, it's
And the importance for that in the city, I suppose.
It's another incredible resource that we can offer to residents, right? I talked a little bit about the council meeting about why, to me, this is, you know, deeply personal, but I'm just one person, right, in a city of 100,000+. So you think about how much more that sort of ripples out and how many lives that this is helping and touching that we don't even know about, you know. My sister, you know, now has been diagnosed with a severe form of autism, but before that, when she was younger, they weren't sure if it was Down syndrome, but anyways, all that is to say that, you know, when she was going through the school system here, when she was much younger, it was great because she was so close. We were able to be close to the teachers, you know, go through the IEPs and understand what was wrong, get help, but it was all close by. The older she got, when we realized she needed more support, it had to be out of the city. And now even she's out of the city for a day program, right? All that is to say, it's hard on her, not just us, right? It's hard on the individual who needs help when they have to be in a car, in the traffic that we have, right? Traveling back and forth in their program, right? Traveling back and forth to meet with the leaders who are helping these kids. It all just adds an additional burden, most importantly to the child who needs the help, right? And so then to be able to say, no, we're going to take away that barrier, right? Travel is no longer going to be a problem. We're going to keep you right here in the city and support you right here in the city. You don't have to think about who's going to drive 30, 40 minutes out, right? Sometimes an hour to get this child to where they need to go. It's just, nope, just going down the street and that's it, you know? It's a tremendous resource. I can't wait for it to open. I think it's going to be something that hopefully builds over time to include adult services. But for now, the amount of children alone in Quincy it'll help is going to be amazing.
And I suppose the ribbon cutting, or some portion of that, was done recently, a recent tour. But when, I know this was a presentation before the Quincy City Council, when is the date or the presumed date for the actual opening?
So I don't have an exact date, but I do know that they had mentioned during the presentation to the council that they do want to start moving students in to start at the beginning of the year. And so we're looking at the end of the next quarter, ideally, to see the doors actually open and housing students. And it's going to fly by, I think, the time, but I'm really excited.
This next piece, I think this actually can be filed in the category of what community groups can do, how they can change the trajectory. And I'm speaking of the Ruth Gordon Amphitheater. The administration saw that as an area to kind of redesign. There was a community group that got together, not only in support, but actually established a whole concert series through this past summer. Talk about that and maybe your feeling about that as a performance space.
That's incredible. I mean, that's what this should be about. That's what this work should be about, right? I have my own lived experience here, but it should not just be about my agenda, right? The work I do as an at-large counselor can't be just about my agenda, right? It's about what do folks in the community want? And so it's not just the Ruth Gordon Amphitheater, it was also the Abigail Adams statue that we had, right? It was also the LGBTQ plus commission that got formed, right? It's also, the votes that we had to take to make sure that we were changing over the decision process for construction in the downtown, right? I mean, like, all of the decisions that come in front of us, I see, are driven by groups like this, right? That step up, reach out to us, and make their voice heard and make their opinions known, right? We may not always agree on things, but the important thing is that they're going to be heard. And so it could be on, a number of different issues, big or small. If folks don't reach out to us, we're not going to know what we don't know, right? And so I think that's a great example of showing that if you reach out to us, we will listen, because that is our job, whether it's email, phone call, Facebook Messenger, Twitter, whatever it is, a letter in the mail. I still get letters in the mail from residents asking about things as well, in support or against, or simply just inquiring about things. And, again, with the number of hours in a day and the number of issues in front of us, we do the best we can to address them as quickly as we can. However, again, it's if folks aren't bringing it to our attention, right, we don't know what we don't know. And so, yeah, maybe it's something that we had noticed, but maybe it's not. I found out about it through folks in the community actually talking about it and posting it on social media. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? And then people started emailing and reaching out to me, and I was like, oh, wait, right? So had it not been for residents who were vocal and stepped up and stepped out and reached out to me, I wouldn't have known, right? So I want to encourage people to do that, not just, again, with this issue, with any issue. Please reach out, because I want to know what's going on, and I want to know, again, what I'm missing or what I don't know.
And you had mentioned just moments ago about inclusion. Mm-hmm. Talk about equity and inclusion. And the city, I think the last time you and I spoke, there wasn't a person in charge of that. Mm-hmm. Since that was another, I suppose, request to have someone in the city that held that position. Well, since someone has been hired and has met with counselors, has met with you.
Yep. So again, residents reached out, they wanted something, we did the work, and now here it is, right? So again, that's another example of, again, why that's so important for folks to engage and make sure that their voices are heard. With this position in particular, when Damien was hired, he and I sat down for probably about an hour and a half and had essentially a listening session for him, which was great, right? It was not unlike this, where we just talked about anything and everything going on in the city. And my takeaway from that was, because he really wanted to come in and say, I'm not going to implement all of these changes when I don't even know what I'm changing, right? Like, let me just do a temperature check. Let me just get a lay of the land here, right? Again, he's in Quincy, right? He lives here, so he knows what he knows, but he took that step back to say, I know what I know, and I know my experience here. But I'm not representing just me, I'm representing the entire city. So let me go and meet with all stakeholders, all elected officials, residents. I mean, any community event that goes on, he shows up to it. I see him at the community events because he just really wants to understand.
You have to absorb all of that in that position, I would imagine.
Exactly. And
then decide, what maybe needs tweaking.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that it's not just about what needs tweaking, but he wants to find out what's working well, and until, to your point, unless he absorbs all of that and really understands all of it, he's not going to be able to make that best next step. And so he's doing both things, right? He's trying to understand where we are right now, and then use that to figure out what works well, let's keep doing it, what's not working, and let's make some changes.
Very good. This half hour has flown by.
Has it already been half an
it's
hour?
Already been
but we have so much more to talk about.
I know. Let's just extend it. Let's forget about the director in the other room. Thank you so much for coming in, and we'll just have to chat at another time.
I would love to. Thank you for having me, really. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you at home for watching. Please continue to support Quincy Access Television for programming and for guests just like this one that joined me here today. Thank you, Councilor Liang.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.